So hello everyone, and welcome to this first video with Mutable Instruments Plaits. Not plaits, as I saw someone said, plaits, as in plaiting your hair. Braids, braided hair, plaits, plaited hair. With that out of the way, let's dive into it. For this patch, I'll first run you down what's going on, and then I'm going to fly through all the modes, have a jam and play around on this thing before getting more in depth in certain modes and doing certain things with it in future videos. So my modulation is a slow LFO from TiNRS, just unsynced, and that is going into the modulation for Morph. But for now, let's pull that out. I have some velocity modulation from Tuesday, from This Is Not Rocket Science. Just stepped values in time with my sequence, going into the timbre modulation. Again, let's just kill that off. I'm triggering this from a rhythm created by the Abstract Data Event Boss, which is coming soon. Fantastic little module for taking clocks or steady rhythms, or already interesting or random rhythms, and creating further variations on those. So I've got a steady clock and a more random gate into this, and I'm CVing between, and there's various algorithms to create the rhythm. So that's what's coming out and actually triggering the internal envelope on Plaits. The internal envelope is triggering an onboard LPG, low pass gate emulation, very much like Streams, which also sounds fantastic. And before I do anything else, well, I've got pitch information going in as well. The onboard low pass gate and envelope is really simple to work with. If we hold the top button, A, more becomes the response, the ringing of this decay envelope and LPG emulation. So let's just listen to that, from tight and plucky, like a nice tight struck Vactrol, to a more open sound. I'm coming out in stereo. This isn't a stereo output. I should stress that from this point. There's a main output and an auxiliary output. But some of the modes sound great, panning these hard left and right. Some not so much, like the kick drum for example. You wouldn't necessarily want two different kick drums hard panned left and right, but you might want to mix or blend them or fade between them, and it's fantastic for that. However, for this little jam, these are going to stay hard panned left and right, so make sure you've got a pair of good speakers on or headphones. And there you go, that's what this is set up to be. The onboard envelope by default routes to these three attenuverters. So without the modulation in, if I wanted, say, some FM to make this more percussive, I'd just turn that up. And that's the same decay envelope used for the LPG emulation. So let's bring my modulation back in, and LFO to Morph, and my stepped modulation to timbre. Now this first mode is a pair of classic waveforms. The harmonics is the detuning between the waves, the timbre is a variable square, narrow pulse and full hard sync type square sounds. The morph will move from a variable saw through triangle, which is like the notched seesaw mode on braids. The auxiliary output is the sum of two hard synced waveforms, and that's controlled by the morph and the harmonics. So let's have a quick play. Moving on, we have a wave shaving oscillator, and already I'm realising this is going to take a long time, so I'm going to jam around a little bit more and I'll get into a more fulsome overview of all these modes later on. Settings are on screen here though. Next up is 2 operator FM. Here's a granular formant oscillator. Next up, a harmonic oscillator, which is a sum of harmonically related sine waves. Then a wavetable oscillator, with all of Braids' previous wavetable modes in there, all rewritten into this big bumper wavetable. We then have the chord mode. Harmonics controls chord type, timbre controls the inversion and transposition, and morphs the waveform. Just going to pull the sequence. So there the stepped random is changing the inversion. And finally, vowel and speech synthesis, which controls SAM, LPC type vowels, and various banks and words. This isn't the best way to demo the speech, but we're still just jamming around. More videos on that soon. We're then on to a granular cloud. Filtered noise. This one's really nice in stereo. This is then particle noise. And these little random, almost like vinyl crackly sounds that are coming from the different outputs would be great for randomly triggering other events in a system. We then move on to inharmonic string modelling. And the aux output here is the raw exciter output. So it's really not an ideal situation for stereo. As I said, it isn't stereo. That's just how I'm flying through this kind of jammable demo to start with. Let's just pull that out for a second. And that's the main output in mono. Really lovely string. So that's the inharmonic string modelling. Here's the modal resonator bank. Still in mono because the aux output is just a rough, raw exciter signal. It doesn't particularly work well in this stereo application for this jammable demo that I'm doing. The next mode is an analog kick drum model, and I am going to move back to these being in stereo. As I said at the start of the video though, you wouldn't use two kicks hard panned left and right. This is just me demoing this. Both outputs, so you can hear both at once. Even switch one of your speakers off if you really want and hear one side rather than the other. I have plenty more videos to come. So let's take some of the modulation out and just check out the kind of raw kick qualities. We can have more pitch envelope with the onboard decay envelope, and that's pre-normaled to these knobs as I said. So if we were to pull these out, so there's a huge potential range of kicks. The next mode is an analog snare model. The aux output here is the emulation of a different classic snare drum circuit. These are two different kick circuits. And finally, the analog hi-hat model. And again, let's pull the modulation and just explore these hats. The aux output here is a variant on a different flavour of tuned noise based on the ring modulated square waves. And this is a kind of classic way, like in an 808, of getting cymbal sounds, ring modulating squares at fixed frequencies. Blending in noise is also another common technique for the hats. And let's put the stepped modulation into the morph, controlling the decay. pitch sequence back in. Let's say the ELFO from Tides to timbre. So that's a quick stereo, but not really meant to be stereo, jam of Plaits. Its modes, its sounds, controls on screen. A more fulsome demo will follow, going more in depth, but I also want to focus first on each mode, because don't forget, any of these modes would warrant the space and the sound quality. If you just want this virtual analog with lots of extra control, or just wavetables, or just drums, it's fantastic for that. You don't have to bounce between all the different modes. For a whole gig or an album or a piece, it could just serve one purpose. But all those different purposes are great. Thanks for watching, hit like and subscribe. Go support me on Patreon if you like extra content, both with Plaits and other modules. There's bonuses for those guys over there, and they're supporting me, enabling to do all this content for everyone. So cheers to everyone on Patreon, and thanks for watching.